Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our Legends edition. Jeremiah Long is our producer and engineer. Along with me is our co-host and founder, Vincent Turner. And Vincent, today we're going to talk about a guy. I'm going to steal your thunder. You said trailblazer just before we went on the air, and this is one of those guys that helped set the pace not only on the field but off it. Great football player, obviously, but a trendsetter in terms of being one of the first. And we're going to talk about Tank Younger today, guy that I'm so grateful that you brought to my light. He's a heck of a football player now, a guy that went to Grambling, and we'll talk about this in just a little bit. But your first impressions?
First impressions, first African-American player to come out of the SWAC conference. I consider him the greatest athlete, and it had some great ones only because he was the first one and the pressure that he had on him. And we could talk about so many great football players from the HBCU standpoint, but after you watch the video there, I hope that everyone who says they love HBCUs, love black college football, even when Deion Sanders was at Jackson State, not one time during that period, anybody didn't mention this man started it. Tank Younger out of Grambling State University. And I know it's a lot of people down there in Ruston, Louisiana, and down there in Grambling, Louisiana. I know you're watching the video today. And don't none of y'all talk about Tank Younger. But we are today here on 100 Yards of Football. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Well, we appreciate everyone being a part of the show, and we also want to say thank you. As you talked about pressure a little while ago, the pressure of the end of the season here for the Atlanta Vibe, the Pro Volleyball Federation's team here in the Atlanta area. Their last home game of the year is going to be on Sunday, May 4th at 6 o'clock at the Gas South Arena. They're going to be playing against the Omaha Supernova. Tickets are available. You can go to atlantavibe.com. You can go to gassouthdistrict.com. You can also go to your favorite ticket agency, and you can get the last regular season game. The playoffs are soon approaching. You want to pack the house along with the Atlanta Vibe. They are 18-8 overall. They're 10-3 at home, and you can help them pack the house by being at their very last regular season game just before the playoffs begin. Again, that is May 4th at 6 p.m. at the Gas South Arena. All right, Vincent, here we go. Paul Lawrence Tank Younger was born on June 25th, 1928. And you had mentioned, I thought he was born in Grambling, Louisiana, but you said that he was born in Los Angeles, and then they moved at a very early age to Grambling, where he had close ties to the high school Grambling that supports there, and obviously the university. But very early age, Tank was an incredible athlete.
Well, if I want to be corrected here, and I don't want to give out wrong information, you could put it on me. It was Ralph Emerson Jones who was the president, and that was Tank Younger's godfather. And I believe Tank was born in LA, and then he ended up in Grambling because of that situation right there. But when you're looking at a guy that obviously I think really a lot of people don't understand from an African-American athlete standpoint, this is a guy that got it started from the HBCUs for us. And everyone knows that I grew up in the 60s, and my father used to take me to see Tennessee State play, and I saw so many great athletes, Claude Humphrey, Eldridge Dickey, Joe Street Gilliam. The list goes on and on, Mike Hetman, Ed Too Tall Jones. But one thing that I remember is that it always takes one person to set the tone and bring somebody to the MEAC, to the SWAC, to see all that talent that was coming out of it in the 40s and 50s. With Tank Younger, as you mentioned the first word, trailblazer. You think about trailblazer, setting a new standard. Then you think about warrior, fighting for every breath that takes to play on that level. And then during those times, you can use your imagination. I don't have to go there. And then you're talking about the chosen one. Well, the chosen one is a responsibility. It's a purpose. It's a destiny. A lot of people can't be the chosen one a lot of times. It takes a special type of person. And I want to give Eddie Robertson credit for coaching this young man and telling him what he meant to being the first one from the SWAC in the HBU standpoint. But when you look at Tank Younger, I'm calling him Eddie Robinson, is no better football player. 6'3", 225 pounds, skill set when he was at Grambling. Nickname Bull Elephant. Think about that. The nickname Bull Elephant. Vision, speed, size, football IQ, all A pluses. But most of all, that I'm remembering for, he was the first one. Deacon Jones, Willie Davis, Walter Payton, Harry Carson, Emmett Thomas, Buck Buchanan, Willie Lanier. Do I have to keep going on? In the legendary down there from Stockville, Mississippi, Jerry Rice. Back to you, Hart.
Well, you mentioned Eddie Robinson, and Tank had a way of making impression. Now, we don't know much about his high school days, but if you're working backwards, from 42 to 44, he was in high school, and he played well enough there. You mentioned he was 6'3", about 215 pounds. He was strong, he was quick, he was agile. He was basically a star lineman in high school. And Eddie Robinson brings him into Grambling as a tackle. But because of his agility, his quickness, his athleticism, his speed, they end up moving him to halfback or fullback. He played both. And what a difference he made when he gets there. That's how he gets the nickname Tank, is guys are bouncing off of him. He's rolling over everybody. And because the war effort was still going on and everyone was very familiar with that, Tank was a perfect nickname for him. He had 25 touchdowns his freshman year. Now, I'm assuming that most of them, we don't have a whole lot of his stats, but we do know that once he touched the ball, it was going to be very difficult to bring him down. So I would imagine goal line, short yardage situations, if you only need 1 or 2 yards, you give the ball to Tank, and he's going to get the ball either across the goal line or get you a first down. But he plays well enough there at Grambling. Remember, 25 touchdowns his first year. I don't know much about his sophomore year, Vincent. I couldn't find anything. Junior year, he rushed for over 1,200 yards. He had 18 touchdowns that year. He passed for 11 touchdowns. He was 43 of 73, so he had a little bit of quarterback in him also. At least you give him the ball, and then he gets out in the side of the play near the sidelines, and he's able to pass the ball down the field. He ends up leaving Grambling with an all-time record of over 60 touchdowns. So he definitely makes very good use of his time while he's there, and is an impression on everybody, including Eddie Robinson.
Well, like I said, he was the first one. And going to the National Football League, that's a story that the Rams had offered him $4,000 up front. Eddie Robinson said, no. Let's give him $6,000. And I would put my life on it that he would make the team. And that was, I think, really one of the keys. And I'm thinking in Tank Younger's mind psychologically that Eddie Robinson believed in me so much that I got to make it in the National Football League. I'm representing so much during that time. And then he goes to the Rams, who at that time were a very good football team. They had their battles with the Cleveland Browns. I think they played each other 3 straight years in the playoffs. And I think in 51, that's when the Rams broke the dam and ended up beating that Cleveland team and winning the National Football League championship. So he went to an organization that already had a lot of talented players. Back to you, Harper.
He sure did. The 49ers, his rookie year. And Jeremiah, if you wouldn't mind putting this up, the 49 season, this is when the Rams win the West. They're 8-2-2. And it is the only season where the LA Rams wore red jerseys and they had red helmets. They end up going to Philadelphia to play in the championship game. Actually, the game was in Los Angeles, but Philadelphia comes out there. The 8-2-2 Rams win the Western Division, and they lose to Philadelphia in 49. They switch back to the blue and gold, but they were called purple or foreign blue, is the way like the Lakers and the Kings used to have in those days. But rookies that year were Norm Van Brocklin, Bob Waterfield. There was a young player, Glenn Davis, who we've already discussed, Tom Fears, Dick Heron. So the Rams had a pretty good team. In 1950, they were 9-3. They tied with Chicago. They go to the playoffs. They beat Chicago in the first round of the playoffs and win the conference on December 17th, but they lose to Cleveland 30-28 on Christmas Eve in the championship game there. In 51, they were 8-4 in the regular season. They win the West again, and they beat Green Bay in a game against the Packers in Los Angeles, and then they lose to Cleveland. They were tied at 17 in the fourth quarter, and this is 51 team that ends up winning it. They had 2 games that they needed to play. They were tied at 17 in the fourth, and Norm Van Brocklin throws a 73-yard touchdown pass to Tom Fears, and they end up winning that game 24-17 in 51, and they end up being the champions of professional football. They had 8 Pro Bowlers that season, so certainly being a part of that. Tank Younger didn't play exclusively. He wasn't the lead or the star, but he was certainly a part of a fantastic football team and had been so since he gets there in 1949.
And think about them Cleveland Browns team that they beat in 51. Otto Graham, Dante Lavetti, Dub Jones, Bill Willis. But getting back to Mr. Younger, coming in and being able to fit in with all that talent and all that pressure on, they should tell you what type of player and person he was. But the one thing about Tank Younger, from a football standpoint, he played linebacker also, is that the skill set during that time and during that time, they was hitting, as I call, for money. They was hitting what I call for positions. They was in what I would call livelihood. He was explosive, made defenders miss, instincts, change of direction. Everything about him was special as a football player. But today, the one thing I want to bring up is that all those great players, let me throw in Art Shell in that lineup I put on. Let me throw in Henry Lawrence. Let me throw in Jimmy Giles. What would have happened if he didn't make it in the National Football League in 1949? We had a pipeline, all these great players coming from the HBCUs and the SWAC and the MEAC. Very interesting point. But I would say this. Every year when we talk about college football, from the Black perspective, from the HBCU perspective, y'all should start out with that one player who set the tone, and that's Tank Younger. When we do all these documentaries, when we do all these Hall of Famer players that's coming out of these great Black schools, I understand this, but his name should go to the top of the list. Matter of fact, when you open your mouth, you should say Tank Younger, Grambling State University, the LA Rams. Back to you, Mr. LeBel.
Well, as an LA Ram, he obviously wins a championship there in 52 and 53. I'm sorry, 52. 51 is when they win the championship. The 52 season opens with the loss against Cleveland. They were 1-3 at one point. Then they went 8 in a row, and they end up tying the Detroit Lions. They lose to the Lions in Briggs Stadium, 31-21. There's a new team in the league called the Dallas Texans. They go 1-11. But the reason I bring up the Lions is some guy named Bobby Lane, who we've talked about, Doak Walker. The Lions end up becoming one of those teams that you need to beat if you're in the National Football League. In 53, the Rams go 8-3-1. The Lions were 10-2, along with the San Francisco 49ers. Those were the 2 teams out of the West. They get a new head coach in Hamp Poole. 54, they're 6-5. The Lions go 9-2 that year. Again, Bobby Lane and the Detroit Lions were making history there in Detroit. 55, they go 8-3. They win the West, and Sid Gilman is the head coach for the Rams in 55. They advance to the championship game. They lose to the Cleveland Browns again, 38-24. There were 87,000 fans that were ready for that game. But they lose that title game, and they don't play again for another 24 years. The LA Rams had a long, dark, no playoff, no championship until they end up going to the Super Bowl. They represent the NFC with the LA Rams against the Steelers in 1980. They were 4-8 in 56, and in 57 they were 6-6. They had guys like Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch. They had Norm Van Brocklin, and it was the last season that Tank Younger played in a Rams uniform. In 58, he goes to Pittsburgh, and there was a trade early in the year, and Earl Morrall and 2 draft picks end up going to Detroit, and they bring in Bobby Lane. So Tank Younger and Bobby Lane end up becoming teammates. They were 7-4-1 that year. They were 2-4 in the preseason. At one point, they were 1-4 in the regular season. Then they go 6-0-1. But that was the last year that they played at Forbes Field. They moved to Pitt Stadium, where they had 60,000 people, and it was a football-related stadium on the campus there at the University of Pittsburgh. Jackie Sherrill knows a few things about that.
Yes,
they
sir.
left Forbes Field, which was really a baseball first, and there were only 40,000, but they struggled all season long, and really to get a big crowd in. The biggest one that they had was the second game of the year, the first home game. They had 31,000 fans there. They lose to Cleveland 45-12, and then the rest of that season, the Steelers struggled. Tank Younger had a 1-yard touchdown run against San Francisco and Philadelphia in back-to-back weeks, and then a couple weeks later, he had a 2-yard touchdown against the Washington Redskins, and those are the last scoring opportunities that Tank Younger had. An amazing career, 4-time Pro Bowler. He had 3,640 yards on 770 attempts. He had over 100 receptions for over 1,067 yards, 35 touchdowns. One of those was a reception, and certainly an amazing pro career. And he was a collegiate Hall of Famer. So Tank Younger was an amazing football player. Final thoughts, Vincent, from you.
Chosen one. Responsibility, a purpose, a destiny. I don't have to say no more. The mic is dropped. Football players come in so many shapes and forms. And when you look at it, Tank Younger holds a special place in my life because I grew up watching, obviously, SWAC football in the early 60s. And I think about the great Tennessee State teams, and one thing comes to my mind is that Tank Younger out of Grambling State University set the tone for so many great players out of the HBCUs during that time. Honor, respect, love, Tank Younger, hey man, stay blessed. And he had an outstanding career after he finished playing, and I let you tell that, Hawk. He was a very good GM. But when we look at football, think about Tank Younger setting the tone back in the late 40s and early 50s. Back to you, Mr. Harper LeBel.
Yeah, his NFL career spans from 1949 to 58. So in the 10 years that he was a part of that, 9 of those were with the Rams, 1 with the Steelers. And when he was done, he ended up moving into the front office. He was a scout and then front office administrator. He was the first African-American assistant general manager to be a part of the LA Rams organization. And for obvious reasons, his prowess, his understanding of the game, and his expertise lasted until 1975 when he finally retired and stepped down from there. He is a college football Hall of Famer, and he was an NFL champion, 2-time Pro Bowl, second teamer, first teamer in 1951. That was the year that they won the champion, and he went to 4 Pro Bowls from 1951 to 53 and also again in 1955. He is Paul Lawrence Tank Younger, born on June 25th, 1928. He died on September 15th, 2001. So we want to honor him and pay tribute to all the great things that he did for football, for professional, for college, for HBCUs, and as an administrator to keep the game of football going on even further than that. So we appreciate everything that Tank Younger did, and we appreciate you being a part of our show here today. Thank you so much to Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, to Vincent Turner, our co-host and the founder of 100 Yards of Football. This has been our Legends Edition. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your day.